Welcome everyone to Heart Snuggles. We're so happy you're here today. And I brought a lovely friend from Yoni Circle, which is the most amazing app for women to share stories and connect from all over the world. So go ahead and tell them who you are.
Hi, I'm so excited. This is like my first, actually podcast that I've been invited to, or I actually invited myself to be honest. But yeah, I'm so excited. My name is Perry. I'm an artist from Canada. I currently live in BC, and yeah, I'm kind of just like a woman, a human being, living on Earth, trying to make sense of all the pieces and yeah, showing up as best and as powerfully as I can in this world.
Guys, so amazing. I love all the stories I've heard from you. You're such a good storyteller and really powerful creative. So I'm so excited to have you on here and share you with more people. And to start off, I'd love to know what was the last random act of kindness someone did for you?
Okay, just yesterday. So I'm at this Airbnb, and I I went for a run, and I decided to not take my phone with me. And so there's a code that you need to punch in to get into the Airbnb, and I repeated to myself the code before, and I was like, I'll remember it for sure. But then after the run, like I go out, put in the code, and it's not working, and there's no one else like in the apartment, and I'm like, damn, what am I gonna do? Like I'm just logged out, like I don't have my phone. And I was actually scheduled to be on a circle in that time, and I had to like note I was a no show for this. Um, so I went and I knocked on the neighbor's door, and I was like, "Yo, do you have the number for the person who owns the apartment?" She's like, "No." Um, and I kind of just explained, like, "No, I kind of got lost out. I got locked out." And then she's like, "Well, do you want a water? You just went for a run?" And I'm like, "Sure." And then I was like, "Oh, actually, like, I have their email address. If I can send them an email, I might be able to get the code." So I asked her, and she's like, "Yeah, sure. Just take my computer." And like, she's like invited me in. She's like, "Can you sit on the sofa?" And I just like sent them an email, and they replied within like 10 minutes. They gave me the code, um, which is really nice because I've been in situations like that, and oftentimes people are not as like open to helping, but she was just so like lovely and so open and so nonchalant about being helpful. And that felt really good.
Oh, that's so cute. And I've definitely been in those situations too. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it can be uncomfortable to ask for help in those moments. And then when you get denied, it's like, what? Like, why wouldn't you help me right now? It's such a
Yes,
weird,
right? Yeah.
weird thing. But I'm glad she was able to help you.
Yeah. Oh my God, I was so happy.
And so this month's theme is grief. So I'd love to hear your perspective on grief.
Okay, like I never thought I was someone who had grief just because like I never experienced death really in my family or in anyone close to me. And I always thought like grief was when someone died, or grief was for people who, just experience like deep loss or whatever. And it took me until like this year to finally understand the emotion of grief and how it has nothing to actually do with like physical death sometimes. And there's so many things that we grieve, like having a dream that doesn't pan out, or like for me, um like I left like a whole life behind. So like I grew up in a very like isolated religious community, and I left when I was like 18, and I left everything I knew, like my comfort, my home, my roots. And for a long, long time, I was kind of like on the run and just like trying to make life work. Like, just like, I need a job, I need to eat, I need to like make something out of myself. And also, like, I was a bit emotionally immature, I guess. And I was just like, I wasn't really in touch with my feelings. And I never really kind of accepted for myself, or I still have a hard time accepting for myself that this deserves to be grieved. Like, there's actually so much that I lost. And whether that's good or bad, or whether that was right or wrong, doesn't fucking matter. Like, grief is a feeling, it comes up. It's like my body feels grief. I can't like override it with like, oh, it was just, it was the right thing to do, or the body doesn't care. It's like it experiences loss. And like for me, what I'm coming to is like giving myself space to process the grief, and not running from it, as hard as that is. And also at the same time, not like drowning in the grief, because it can get like a lot, to find like anchors and things in my life to bring me joy, so that I actually don't become like a grief stricken person, which I'm terrified I'll become. um, and I won't, like grief passes. It's not like forever, but when you're in it, it does sometimes feel like it's all that there is.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's really hard to sink into because you feel that's exactly what you feel. It's like if I sink into this, like I'm gonna be stuck in it
It's
forever.
never gonna end. Yeah. And like I will lose myself, and then no one will like me. I'll just be this like horrible person who cries all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I definitely know that. I just experienced a deep grief the other day. It was like really hard, but think it was really nice that I was alone. Like at first I was like, oh, I don't want to be alone right now. But then it was like so nice to be alone and just really experience it and watch how actually quite quickly it moves through when I like fully surrender
Mm.
into it and just allow myself to cry and like cry so loudly, like when you start hyperventilating and all those things, it's like just go there. And then you just feel this huge weight lifted off. And
Mm.
but yeah, I would love to hear like how do you know what grief is in your body? Because you said that a few times. And I think a lot of people, like you said, you didn't even realize it was grief. So how did
Mhm.
you realize that your body was showing you grief?
Um, I think there are different ways it can manifest for me. Like, also, by the way, like if you want to share the story of what happened, you can after this. I'd love to hear. Um, but for me, it often expresses itself as a like listlessness, like as a almost like a death, like um, and not wanting to live. Like it just is a deep sadness that just stops all levels of life, and it's just like I'm taking over. And in my body, like I can feel weak in my body, like I just feel weak. Um, and Yeah, I think I've in my throat, like I feel it in my throat a lot. Like I'll have a desire to say something or do something, but it it just overtakes me, and it almost like I no longer have the energy to do whatever I wanted to do. And yeah, that is what I would call grief, is this like internal sadness.
Yeah, that's very similar to me too.
Really.
It definitely comes. It's really heavy. Yeah, so I guess I can share my experience. What happened the other day was I woke up and I felt weird and I didn't know what it was, but so I like tried to distract myself by eating and like working
Mhm.
and I just kept distracting, but that weird feeling wasn't going and I knew I just needed to sit down. But I was trying to ignore it and finally I was like, all right, just go in your room, lay down, and do some breath work. So I turned on Brie
Mm.
Mellison's breath work. She's the most amazing intuitive. And I was so antsy the whole time. I was like fidgeting and I couldn't stay
Mhm.
still. But I was like, just stay with it. Like, just keep breathing, even if you're not breathing the whole
Yes.
time. Like, and I think that's really important for me because usually I would just give up if I couldn't do it correctly, quote unquote. But this time I just stayed with it. And then towards the end of it, I started to like really start grieving old parts of myself for all the times like I didn't believe in myself and all the
Right.
times I was so mean to myself and like grieving like how hard I am on myself and like the old versions of
Mm.
me and
Yeah.
how like far I've really come and it's kind of crazy how far I've come from who I was just a few years ago and then I checked my phone, and I it was my friend Georgie. She passed away 3 years ago that day, and she overdosed on her pain meds because she had severe chronic pain, and she had a ton of PTSD. Like, she was abused by police, and anyway, she's had a lot of things happen to her. But so she overdosed on her pain meds, and her mom found her um, dead in her bed, and so that happened 3 years ago. And so then I just started like fully re-grieving her, even though like I've already there's
Yeah,
no such
right.
thing as
Yeah.
completing. The thing that's very apparent is there's no such thing as completing grief. It's like a lifelong journey. So
Mm.
although I feel like I've grieved her enough, like that it's just not how it works. So it wanted to come up, and so I just let that come up, and then I started thinking about all the other people I've lost. I've lost two friends to suicide, and I've lost my boss in a plane accident. Her and her husband, just the plane exploded within 10 minutes of being in the sky. And so, yeah, just like grieving all of that. And it was just so intense at first, but I was like, it's okay. Like, just let it out. And then I started to journal about it. And then I just danced. And after all of that, I felt a lot better. But there was still like residue throughout the day. So I just felt like kind of heavy and wasn't feeling like talking to anyone. And I just honored all of that. And that felt really good. But yeah, it's intense, and it definitely takes stillness to like go in and feel it and to surrender into it. And I even like, as I was there, I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. And I was like, just do it.
We don't want to do. Yeah, I want to talk about breath work because I also recently started doing breath work, and I think actually that has brought up a lot of grief because it kind of recalibrates your whole body, and whatever is like stagnant gets like reawakened. And um yeah, I did like a 1 hour breathwork session like 2 days ago or something. And I think it takes me a while to like what I feel. I think it takes me a while to recover. And like when you have a lot of things that you haven't perhaps faced inside, like it takes time and mm, like yeah, like you said, like to not feel guilty or to not like shame ourselves for the grief is also really big because um yeah, I feel like in the world, like it's not often that we find places that have a tolerance or an acceptance or an awareness or a love or a compassion for these feelings of grief. And like to be joyful and happy is very celebrated. Like it's easy to bring that emotion. To be passionate is very celebrated. But to be in a state of grief, people are like, oh, like I don't want to get too close to you, right? um and so to become like for me to actually become like in the room that can hold all the grief, to become so big in my energy and my compassion and my love that it's like i can I can hold this without judgment.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think I just want to touch on two things. So in Chinese medicine, each part of the body is related to an emotion, and our lungs are grief.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that's why breath work like really helps to
Right.
especially ignite grief, because that's where it is stored in the body. And so when you can tap into that part, you really release grief. And another part is with our nervous system, our body doesn't know the difference in time. So our body doesn't know time. So things are stored where they're stored, and until they're addressed, they stay hidden. And with our nervous system, emotions don't get released unless unless you feel safe. So as soon as your body is in the parasympathetic and it feels safe, then what needs to come up will come up and rise to the surface. And that's when, like, usually in a yoga class, you might feel some emotions because you're actually like in your body and feeling safe. Sometimes obviously it comes out of nowhere also, and it's like you're
Yeah,
on
I
the
mean
opposite end.
you can read a poem at, like so I yeah, like I write poetry, which is a huge relief. Like writing in general is a huge relief for like working with the body for sure. Working in the body kind of instigates it, and then writing just like cleanses it. And to give ourselves or myself permission to write down the deepest feeling and be like, I hate that this happened, right? Like to really not like try to make it pretty or anything, but to really like, I am so fucking pissed about the. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on the podcast. Yeah. Um, I am so pissed. Like, to really let that like whole extent of emotion to um and to tell your story and to share it with other people. It just like to me, yeah, like the last part, like sharing your story with other people is probably the most powerful thing because I get to relax and feel like I'm not alone and like this is okay and you're not crazy and it's like, oh, like everyone does this, like other people have done this. Like healing is actually really really possible, and like we got this, like as a species, as the collective, like we really really got this. And the more people share authentically their story, like the more also like the collective grief eases, right? Like the more grief becomes more manageable and more easily like digested.
Yeah, I think that's really important that we create more spaces for grief because every emotion is valid and needed and is there for a reason. We weren't born with emotions that we're not supposed to access. And so the
Mm.
more that we can normalize it, the more that people can heal because when you're not allowed to experience grief, you're shutting off a part of yourself. And anytime we do that, that creates more chaos and more problems and disease and all these other things. And so the more that we can accept that that's part of life and that we all face grief, the more that we can support each other through it instead of making it this thing that's like we do it alone and needs to be so like secretive and you don't tell anyone and all this stuff.
It's really funny because like I don't like I was surprised when you mentioned that grief was a topic because I don't find like people often talk about grief. Um and the more I talk to people who are, interested in healing trauma and healing their bodies or on a healing journey, and the more grief comes up, like everyone is like, yo, I think like at the core of it, it's all grief. And like not a lot of people are actually like talking about what to do with grief or what is grief or how to navigate grief or create spaces for grief to fall. So yeah, like thank you for choosing that as a topic, and also yeah, just holding space and sending you love for the losses that like you mentioned. I've never experienced like death of a loved one, but I've experienced grief, and um, yeah, I really support
Yeah, yeah. It's that's why I think it's really important to talk about because um like you said, grief isn't just through death. And I think we get confused in that. And the more that we can realize that we experience grief in other moments, it makes it more manageable when we do experience death. Not that it's ever like completely manageable because it's a really intense emotion to grieve someone, but I've grieved so many parts of myself. And
you. Yeah,
when we can realize that it all comes like everything boils down to an emotion, like everything is connected to an emotion, and just like when you manifest, it's the feeling that you want, it's not the actual
yes,
Lamborghini. It's like it's not that, it's like what's the feeling
yeah,
it's going to bring you. So it's
yeah.
the same thing with like even death. Like we had a good conversation at this event I went to yesterday, and it was saying like how oftentimes we don't want to accept the experience for the person that's passed, and that we're grieving more of our loss rather than theirs. And
Yeah,
now, like, maybe that's what they were meant to do. And instead, we're holding on to, like our version of it. And um, so, yeah, grief is really complex, but I think that it's needs to be talked about more. And it's in Chinese medicine, it's the season of autumn. And so it's the perfect time to talk
mm,
about it. And, with the, death and rebirth are always happening in our lives. And I think that we
exactly. Yeah,
ignore that. And if you look in nature, like it's constant. It's constantly going through those cycles. Even like
exactly.
forests have to be like burned down to regrow. And yeah.
Yeah, I think also like, yeah, we've um like we've developed a certain relationship with death that is very negative, and um, you know, because we're scared of the unknown, and like we're scared of losing things, and it's like death is rebirth. It's like a permission to. It's like clearing out the field for more things to be able to grow, and it's really really positive. It's like it's a really beautiful beautiful thing for something to die. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah, like kind of like learning to look at death like with love. And also, yeah, like the last thing I want to say is like I think we're all changing really quickly. Like a lot of us are experiencing a lot of shifts and a lot of, you know, we're all changing. Like we're jumping timelines. We're like it's just like we're becoming more sensitive, more intuitive. Like so many things don't resonate anymore. We're becoming more like specific about what we want and what we care about and what we want to build in the world. And there is a ton of death that happens with that. And it's like, if we don't know how to do with grief, then it's super challenging to like move through like these shifts. And it's like almost like the foundation to be able to change.
Yeah, we have to let go of things. And
Yeah.
as a society, we're so afraid to let go of things, and from the smallest things, to the biggest things. And the more that we can allow the process of life, because it's forever an up and down, it's forever a death and rebirth, it's forever this like letting go and then receiving and this cycle. And I've learned that the more I turn towards death, the more I receive more life. Like the more fully I live, the more joy I
Yeah.
experience, the deeper I feel into grief and death, whatever you want to call it. Like it expands on both ends. And so it's like even like the more joy I experience, like I have to equally meet that, because it's the same thing. It's on the same side. It's like it is one
Yeah.
thing. And so
I think joy and grief are actually very connected. Like,
they are.
yeah, I experience that too. Like, the more I let go, there's like a heightened sense of joy in my life.
Yeah, but in order to feel that, you have to feel the grief. So it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it's not like one or the other. It's truly both. And if we can, yeah, stop stigmatizing it as being a bad thing to feel sadness, it's like it just is sadness, and with sadness then comes joy. So why not experience the sadness?
yeah. But I'm curious, like, I I have never really experienced like a completion of grief. Like, I've experienced little moments where, like, I think for me, where I am now, it's almost like new in a way in my consciousness, and I've never really experienced the like pure rebirth of after that. And I know, like you mentioned that you that you did, that you had like this moment where it lifts and where you feel alive again. So I'm curious if you can, yeah, share on that.
Yeah, so the most recent time that happened like 3 days ago was me fully surrendering. Like it's been a while since I've done that, where it's not like I have thoughts about what I'm the sadness, or I'm like shaming myself or any of that, and I'm just like experiencing what is, and like until it's done, which it wasn't, like I said, it didn't last that long. And then after that, being like, okay, like that's all, like feelings are meant to be felt. And so emotions are energy in motion. It's like
Mm,
when you can just let that truly flow through, then it transmutes. Like its energy is always changing. And so if we let it just change, shift into something else, it will. And so for me, it was that I was just like feeling this. Journaling is such a powerful process for me as well, because it's just so good in so many ways. And so
yeah,
doing that, and then the last bit of like moving the energy out is moving my body. So everything is connected to the body is what I've really been realizing, lately. And so
same,
the
yeah,
dancing is like combining the the stagnation with like flowy movement and feminine energy, and dancing is just always so powerful to me. And so like when you're dancing, you're like actually moving the rest of it out, and you're tapping back into joy a little bit, and like just remembering, your true
Yeah,
essence.
yeah, I feel that. And also like I love that you said dancing because I feel like it doesn't always have to be uh like an either or. And I feel like sometimes we get these processes where we clear out like huge amounts of grief and like we just have much more room for our natural energy. But other times like, you know, we have a mix of both. We're like, well, we're happy and we're also really sad. And like dancing is nice because um you know, it's a bit of a breath of fresh air. Like I get to experience the grief while at the same time also like not being like a ball on the floor, but also experience other parts of my energy at the same time. Like for me, that helps immensely. Like bringing a little bit of joy into the grieving process. Like it doesn't have to be like completely dark.
Yeah.
Like even like little things, but like if you know like you're experiencing a lot of grief, like have a pretty candle in the room or like I don't know, like wear something you like or just get into an energy that feels good to you actually for me makes the grief pass through quicker because I don't feel like, oh, now I'm a victim to grief and I must sit now in this grief and let it pass. But
Mm.
it's actually like I am a conductor
Yeah.
in a way.
That is so key because, yeah, I've actually never been stuck in like a really long spout of it because I
Mm,
combine the two. And I think that we do that black and white thinking, and
mm,
I've never found that to be the most healing and doesn't move me forward. It keeps me stuck. And so, like you said, combining the two is like this beautiful medicine because you have to celebrate. Like I allowed myself to celebrate feeling grief, and I didn't wait for someone to tell me or someone to do anything. It was like I myself like sat in that. And I'm like, all right, I sat in that. I felt that. Now I'm going to celebrate myself for feeling that and move my body. And this is a form of celebration. And I think that
yeah,
we need to celebrate when we feel hard things because it's fucking hard to feel them. So instead of just
exactly.
like staying in it, yeah, it's like shift the energy, like because the energy is moving now. So it's like keep moving in the right direction by moving the body and even if I like going outside, like there's so many other little ways you can do that. And
Yeah,
yeah, and then now I feel like so much better. And um,
I'm so
not to say
happy.
that I'm not going to experience grief again, but it's just like I moved it through in that moment.
And I think like that's a superpower. Like if you can, if you know how to process grief, if you know how to handle grief, like you're a fucking strong person. Like the the people that I have found most attractive in my life, or actually the people that I've also found that have the most joy, are people who have sat with grief and have learned to love grief and learned to become something from the grief. Like I think women especially are like really good at this, at like because we know how to play with the darkness in a way, and we know how to I don't know like medicine women and shamans, and I'm talking like the real thing, like the people who actually can navigate death and come back, and like there's so much like strength in that. And when you encounter a person who has died many times, you know, it's there's an awe to that. Like there's something in their presence
Mm.
where is just really powerful.
Yeah, I agree. It's yeah. Have you heard of Shaman Durek?
I've heard of him, but I have not like intensively looked into his stuff.
He has this book,
Ooh,
Spirit Hacking, and
spirit
it's
hacking.
really, really good. Highly recommend. He's died before too. So
Yeah.
yeah, well, thank you so much for this conversation, and I would love for you to share where people can find you and anything you're offering.
Yeah, sure. So Instagram is the best way to find me. I also recently started a YouTube channel, but I'm still kind of right now. It's just like whatever I feel like doing. If I feel like dancing, if I feel like talking, if I feel like rapping. So okay, I'm an artist. Like I make music, I write poetry, and I am starting to do like short films, which are super fun. Um, and yeah, find me on Instagram where I share my content. There's also a YouTube in my Instagram link where you can go to. And Um, it's still in the birthing process, but I'm creating a creative container, um, and also like a creative slash self love container. It's for 6 women, and it's yeah, like diving deep into like grief, into self love, what self love means, what it doesn't mean, um, and creativity, and how like for me like creativity saves my soul every day, and how like using creativity to process emotions and just to tap into our fire and our creative essence. So that is coming up. If you're interested, you can send me a message on Instagram. And like,
Awesome. Thank you. And the last question is, when was the last time you made someone smile?
maybe I'm gonna make you smile now. um, I don't know. I think that's a good question. I'll think about that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your offers and being so vulnerable today.
Thank you,
And
Lexy.
yeah, congrats on your first podcast.
Oh, thank you. It's not as scary as I thought.
Good.